Hey, what's going on, everyone? Welcome back to another video. And before we get started here, I just want to take some time, to ask you how your weekend went. Mine was pretty good. Went biking. That was pretty fun. Yeah. So anyway, sorry for the quick interruption, and I'll be back to your content.
Alright, so here we are at the platy tank, and basically what we're going to be doing here is we are going to be trimming / propagating this Pogostemus latus octopus plant, which is kind of taking up the whole tank. So what we're going to do, I will show you for the different kinds of plants what you want to do to propagate, and then we are going to plant this tank, and I'm thinking next week I'm going to be stocking this, and we will start a new breeding project out of that, which should be really fun. So first things first, I want to talk about stem plants. So there are lots of different kinds of stem plants. This would be one right here. What was that? I guess it's more of a runner system. So this is dwarf sage, and basically what will happen is these guys, it'll send roots under, and then another plant will pop up somewhere else. And so basically you'll just start getting these little runners popping up, and it'll basically be just like this. So the original plant is right here, and as you can see, it started sending out runners, and now there's little bits of it all the way down here. So it'll kind of just propagate by itself, and you don't really have to do anything about it. Meanwhile, stem plants, if you look, you have leaves and you got stems. So basically you would cut like right here, and that would end up being a plant. It would actually end up growing if you planted that back in. Meanwhile, if you were to just cut off a leaf, then nothing happens really, it's just gonna die. So I'm gonna cut a stem off of this and show you guys a little bit more close up. So here is our plant, our little sample here. And so right at the end where you could either pinch it or you could cut it, up to you. But what we have here is when we plant this in the ground, there's going to be chemical signals down here, and that will basically start telling it to start growing roots down there, and you will end up getting like basically a second plant. And so you could do this as many times as you want, as long as don't go too crazy with it. Like if you're cutting a little bit like that off, you probably won't get anything growing. So you're gonna want to have a long enough piece where you could bury it, and it will be pretty sturdy in the substrate. And so that's how you do with stem plants. Anywhere really where you could find a good spot to get a lengthy cut, you could do that. So right here, these stem plants, we could do the same things. We could just cut them right down the middle and plant them, and that's actually what I did when we first started. I had my first video on these guys, and I took a bunch of these plants and I chopped them up in half and planted them in here, and so now they've been growing up. And so that's one way you could do it. Next up, we could talk about mosses. So when we look at this is some Java moss. Now this, kind of similar to like the runners, you don't really have to propagate these. These guys grow on their own. I mean, if you really wanted to, I guess if you cut a piece in half, you'll have two growing, but it grows pretty good on its own, I think. So upstairs we have a good example of how Java moss grows out and gets really big, so we could take a look at that. Alright, so here we are in the cherry shrimp tank, and as you can see, there is a lot of Java moss in here, so it's kind of filling up most of this, and the cherry shrimp like it a lot. But basically, I've never touched the Java moss at all. So as soon as you get it in here, it'll start growing. It is a really good plant because even though it's a slow grower, it is really good for fry and shrimplets and whatever you got going. So they're even good for like white clouds and egg layers. It's a good spot for them to lay eggs in. It's like basically, I want to say the best breeder plant because it's pretty good for all fish and live bears too, because they'll have babies in here, and they could eat off the moss and hide in it, and it's really just a good plant form. So Java moss is a good one. You don't really have to do anything with it. Next up, let's talk about floaters. So right here we have duckweed, and this is actually growing in all my tanks, and believe it or not, I started off with about this much, so less than that really. I think I counted 3 pieces that I accidentally got in a fish bag one time, and it is all over. So duckweed is, I mean, it can be a nuisance at times. Like, if you want to get rid of it, all you'd have to do is either feed it to goldfish or a big fish that'll eat it, or just straight up throw it away. So it's pretty easy to get rid of, but floating plants are really nice because they absorb so much more waste from the water, and so I just leave it in all my tanks because it's so beneficial. Okay, some plants can go in between. So if we look right here, we have this water wisteria that's growing in the back as a stem plant, but then when you cut it and float it, it starts growing roots. So you could have it as a floater, or you could plant it either way, and there's a lot of plants that will do that. I've noticed that I kind of like it floating. It does pretty good, I think, and I have it floating in the guppy tank as well. But yeah, overall, these plants, it's up to you really. You could propagate them the same way. So if I cut this in half, then I'd have 2 floaters, and the roots would come out and more leaves would sprout, and etc. Here we have lily, like a pond lily or red lotus. What's the little one called? I'm not sure. I'm gonna have to look that up. I can't remember. But basically, if you look down here, there's a bunch of small little leaves coming out. And so this basically, you don't really have to propagate a whole lot. I mean, if you want, you could snip off from here and just plant it in the substrate. Here, I got another one over here. Let's see. You'd see it, it's that little tiny one down there, but basically you plant this and it'll start growing on its own. So those are pretty easy to grow and propagate. Down here we have Java ferns. These guys are kind of cool, as if you look at the tip of their leaves, you'll find little miniature versions, and that's how they propagate. The little babies start on their leaves. I don't know how or why, but that's kind of how they just do it, and it works pretty good actually. Next up we got Amazon swords. So we have this huge Amazon sword here that's grown to the top of the 20-gallon tank, and basically down here at the bottom, and this is the same for your Anubis species, and I have some Anubis nano over there. I'll show you guys in a bit, and you'll do the same thing with them. But they have these little nodes down at the bottom, and they're like these little sections, and basically you could just chop right in between the stems, and that's what I've done here. So this sword right here, and the one right there used to all be one plant, and so I just cut it, and if you look here, we got a little sprout that's starting to come out, and right there's a new leaf coming out of the middle. I can't really see back there, but I don't know if it's grown. Oh yeah, there's a little leaf. And the same goes for Anubis. We come down here, as you can see that brighter green leaf, that's new growth. And if we come down here, the leaves kind of start off small and they get bigger as they go. But down there at the center of the plant, you would cut right where the little kind of ball things are, like the plant gets a little rounder, and you just chop right in between, and yeah, it works pretty good. Tip for these guys, don't plant the bottom part of them. You want that to be either tied to a driftwood piece or a rock. Another example of a floating plant is the water hyacinths that I got in here. Now normally you can't winter these over, and they are like dying, so that was kind of just a test. I wanted to see how they hold up, and I mean their root systems are still looking pretty healthy, but the tops are all dead, so we'll see if they if they make it for next spring. But these guys, again, are really good at filtering out the water and take out a lot of those heavy metals, so they do a good job at cleaning, and they propagate the same way. So if we come up to the big root that will come out, and you'll start seeing a little water hyacinth start to show up on that, and it'll break off and it'll float away, and you'll have 2 plants. So another one that propagates on its own, and this thing will spread pretty good. You'll buy 3 of them for the pond outside, and by the end of the year or the summer, you'll have it coating the entire top of the pond. So it's another good propagator. All right, so back to this tank. I'm going to clean this, and gonna go look around for some plants I could take out of some other tanks and put in here, and we'll get it planted, and we could check up on the growth. In later videos, you'll see I'll cut them right off the plant and I'll plant them in here, and we'll see them start growing. So I will come back once the tank's all cleaned and we could find some plants to put in here. Alrighty, so here we are. I got it cleaned up for the most part. It's still gonna be murky just because I cleaned it, and so I kicked a bunch of stuff up, but see, we got it planted pretty good. I'm planning on scraping off the algae before I add the fish in and stuff, and hopefully next week we could see what fish I put in here. Should be pretty fun. I hope you guys learned something about multiplying your plants and how to propagate them. It's pretty easy, but you know, each plant is a little different, so it's good to know the difference. Thank you guys for watching, and I will see you next time.
Welcome everyone to the first installment of the Fishy Fam News Network. We are going to be covering some advances in the fish keeping hobby, as well as going over comment of the week. So let's go to Bill with our first story. Bill, take it away. Thank you. Here we got something pretty dang special on our first kind of product review here in the fish keeping hobby. There's this reef cam. Now I don't mess a whole lot about saltwater, but this is the ice cap underwater reef cam at $200. It looks like you could just set it up in your tank and it connects to your smartphone, and you are able to monitor your tanks wherever you want to be. Seems like a pretty cool project, you know. Maybe if you're going on vacation and you miss the fish, you could just say hi to them. It seems like a pretty cool product. Alright, so I think it's about time for comment of the week. I'm gonna hand it over to our good pal Gibby for comment of the week. Alright, and there you have it, folks. That is the first installment of the Fishy Fam News Network. We'd like to thank you all for joining us tonight, and we will see you all next Sunday. Don't forget to comment down below to get featured in the next video. Until next time, we will see you later.
This feeling